Hey, so I want to show you how Meteor and React works together. So I'm going to create a Meteor application with Meteor create and the name of the application. Then I'm going to go ahead and add the packages that are necessary for this example. So that's React, Kadira Flow Router, and Kadira React Router, React Layout Router. And this is just to show the routing options that you have with React. So I'm going to go ahead and find my application and go ahead and drop that in the sidebar of Sublime just to allow me to navigate around. So here is the Meteor package file, and it shows all of the packages. It's kind of like gems, and React, Kadira Flow Router, and React Layouts at the bottom, so that works perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and rename my CSS file just for the sake of old times, and I'm going to rename my HTML file just so I don't go crazy. And I'm actually going to remove everything but the body. And I'm just going to throw a div in there of the class of app. And I don't need this JavaScript file, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Now, what I want to do is I want to create two folders, one folder for client and one folder for server. And essentially, the client side is basically all of the HTML files, all the JavaScript files that have nothing to do with the database or the server. And the server folder is for everything else that we don't want the user to have access to. So if I have some private methods, like for example, if I have a method for deleting users or something of that sort, I would have that logic inside of the server, so just so that the user can't browse through it and read that JavaScript. Now I'm just moving the HTML and CSS files inside of the client folder. Then next what I want to do is I want to create a routes folder. So I'm going to name routes.jsx, and I'm going to put this in the client folder, and I'm going to look at the content. Now the content section right here that I'm highlighting is essentially the page that I'm going to. So I have to create a home page and a general layout page. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into that. So notice that I'm naming this file with a capital letter. So I'm naming this as app with a capital A .jsx, and JSX is the extension for React. The capital letter at the beginning of the file name is just convention to help me know from far away that this is what this file is. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a home React component, and it's basically the same syntax. I'm just going to throw in an H2 and write welcome home in there. So this should get the home page working. So let's go ahead and try this out. So I'm going to head over to my server at localhost 3000. And sweet, the home page works. My Sublime is acting weird. So let me actually go ahead and show you how to add something else. So what if I wanted to add a navigation to the site? So I'm actually going to go in here, and the way you do that is you type in the name of the component. So capital N A V and a closing, so it's a self-closing tag, so you have to put that / at the end. I'm going to go ahead and just write nav here, and I want to go and just put in some links in here. So I'm going to make a number of dead links that go nowhere. Now, the first thing you should know about React is that this does not work. I can't actually put 4 links in a row and load the page. So if I go ahead and refresh, my application will crash and it will show me nothing. If I go to inspect and I go to my console, you can see that it says unexpected opening tag or opening bracket. And what you have to do is you have to nest. You can't have several root elements. You can only send one element per React component. So now that I nested them all inside one element inside of one div, everything should work out, and it does. So it refreshed for us. Now let me go ahead and add a class to this. Now let's say I wanted to space these links out and just give them some color just to see if this class came through. So I'm going to head over to my CSS, my style.css, and I'm going to target space out. I'm going to add some color to it. Let me add a background color, or actually let me just add a regular color to that. I'm going to set the color to being red. I'm going to go ahead and give that a margin of, let's say, 10 pixels. And you notice that the page didn't refresh. React knows when something changed, and basically it could tell that nothing changed. So I'm actually going to force the change by writing differences in my HTML. So I'm going to add class to all of these guys, refresh, and it says, did you mean class name? So in React you can't use class. You can use ID, you just can't use class. And the reason why is because class is a keyword that's been taken by JavaScript. So now that I changed it to class name, all of those links work. So let me actually make those links go somewhere. Let me actually make another page. So I'm going to go over and make an about page. Capital A right there for the React component. I'm actually going to just copy this over and replace it with about. Make this one go to home. And that one go to about. Wait for the reload. Sweet. So this link doesn't work. So I made a mistake somewhere. So I forgot to put / about for the route. So I'm going to add that, and the page reloads and everything works. Cool. So if I wanted to have a more complex page, page of a form, I'm going to go ahead and do this. So I'm going to create a new folder called collection. This is basically just to hold collections for my database. So I'm actually going to go ahead and copy it from a previous project. And I guess I can make this called cars. So I'm going to need a new route for the creation of a car. I'm going to call it new car. So I'm creating a car component here, and now I just want to create a link to that. Sweet. Now this link is not working for some weird reason, and it seems that I found that I've had this issue before, and it's because the name is the same exact file name. So if I just change it to car and change the component to called car, it should work, because there is a collection called cars already. So there is already a cars.js. So this will actually resolve it, just making this singular. So now I want to go ahead and add a form, and I know I can't have two root elements, so I have to create a div here. And I want to show you something. I want to throw a break tag in here between the h2 and the end of the div, and this will actually return an error. So this is unterminated. So what you have to do is you have to make sure when you ever use a break tag that you put a / at the end, because React will complain. So any self-closing tag has to have the /, and this is actually still broken, and it's because I forgot the / in the div, and that will actually break React. And now everything works. Cool. So I'm actually going to head over to an old application and copy over the form here. So I have here basically a form. It's a form that just takes two inputs and has a submit button. Don't mind the spacing. It's just and people who put React code online tend to space out their attributes, and I did just the same. Now the only thing that's different here is that this form has an on submit this.addCar, and basically this is saying that exactly when the form is submitted to execute some JavaScript called addCar, and when it says this.addCar, it means that this car React class is going to look for a method called addCar and then execute it when this form gets submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and create this addCar function. I'm going to throw a comma after that, and basically I'm just going to have it say alert, just to know that this is working. Let me just make sure it's spaced out properly. And the page is not reloading. It says, oh, there we go. There's an error. And that's because that's not a comma, it's a semicolon. I'm going to put that comma here, reload this. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out this form. Fill it out. I have sign in here. Let me change that. Sweet. Let me fill this out. Now the only issue, so this works, only issue is that the page reloads. We don't want the page to ever reload. So I have to tell this form that I'm not going anywhere. So I'm going to say e.prevent default. And now everything should work perfectly fine. Okay, cool. So now let me actually insert this into the database. So I'm going to go ahead and remove alert and start this out. So when I write, I want the cars, and I want to insert into the database. Basically, this takes a JSON, and since it's NoSQL, there is no schema, so I can go ahead and write whatever I want inside of the insert. So I'm going to create a variable called type of car, and basically it's just going to be jQuery to get the value out of the input field. And this is the general way on how you do this. So I'm going to say, okay, get me a variable called type of car, and get the variable out of an ID called car. And also I need user, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to pass this JSON in here, and everything seems fine. Actually, I have an error right here. Cool. Now I can ask my database if this actually worked, and I could basically have a return. So if this inserts, it will return to me, or if not, actually, regardless, it will return to me an error and an ID. So I can say if an error exists, basically console out, hey, something went wrong. And otherwise, if there was no error, I would have the ID. So that would work. Now what I'm thinking about doing is actually clearing out the values. Since there is no page reload and we stay here, I should probably clear out the form after it's submitted. So I'm just going to target the IDs and set the value to blank. Cool. Now everything should work. So I'm going to go ahead and try this out. So let's go fill this in, and success. This works. Now what if we actually wanted to show what's going on? How do we actually show the cars as they're added? So let's go ahead and do that. Now the way this is done is with something called get initial state, and basically when this component loads, it will go ahead and load some information. So basically I want this component to load and get me all of the cars that are currently made. So with this right here, get initial state, it will return to me a JSON variable. So let's try this out. I know the way to get all the cars in NoSQL, or in Node for that, rather for Node, is to do .find.fetch. That will get me all of them. And if you type .find.fetch, you could actually get it inside of the console here. So let me actually go ahead and try that. So I'm going to say, give me all the cars. Now one thing I want you to notice in React is that if I type var all cars, it will make it a local variable. If I just type cars, it'll make it a global variable. So be careful when you're doing that. So now I'm just trying to remember the map function and basically to loop through all the individual cars right here. So I added debugger right here in the render just so I could show you how the variables get passed in Meteor and React. So I have debugger here, so it should pause the app. So I'm going to reload the page, and in Chrome it paused the app. So I'm going to type this, and it shows out all the information that I have. So if I type this.state, it actually shows you how this is passed. So whenever you do get initial state, it will pass it as this.state. So the way I loop over content is with this.state.cars.map function x, and this will set x equal to each individual, just like .each in Ruby. So x is set to each individual. Right now I just say loop through and print out the actual value of x, which is just the letter x. And now if I want to go ahead and change that, I can go ahead and do that. So let me actually print out the individual car. And now it should reload by itself and print out some shit. Sweet, so it works. Now let me actually put in another one and press submit. Now a problem occurs. It said success, but it only gets you the new one on page reload. Essentially, really not page reload, on component reload, and it gets the initial state again. So what I have to do is I have to make this reactive. I have to make it so that Meteor's React is always looking for the change in Meteor data. So I'm going to go ahead and do this now. The way this is done is by adding a Meteor package that allows React to keep track of reactive Meteor data. And I'm adding it right now. So I'm gonna comment out get initial state, and I have here on the left hand side an example of this built out in another application. I'm actually going to paste this in. Don't mind this commented out line. JSX is just really weird, and sometimes it messes up. So I'm actually going to get out the middle and replace it with what I have written under it. So I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to drop this in here. Don't forget to add a comma, and I'm going to uncomment this stuff. And this should actually work. Sweet. So the only thing is that it will pass the data back inside of a different variable. So I'm going to just go ahead and put a debugger in here. Notice how I put debugger before the return. If you put debugger in the return, it's going to break. So I'm going to reload and have a debugger, and let me just see what this is. So I'm going to type this, and I'm going to type this dot data, and that's where it's stored. So this dot data dot cars, and that's how you do it. So let me remove debugger and change this dot state to this dot data, and now everything should work. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out the debugger pause, let the page reload, and fill this out. And it works live. Sweet. Now I want to go over another issue, and the other issue is that if I set value equal to something, so let's say I set value equal to your email, it means that it will no longer be able to be changed. So if I allow this page to reload, I go over here and I type away, and it won't allow me to change this input. So no matter what I do, I can't change it. So if I actually Google it, there's actually a way to keep track of the change in React and then make sure it updates. But it's a bit of hefty code to do that. So instead, there is another way to do it, and it's just to use the default value. So the default value when the component loads will get set, and then if ever you want to change it, you can. Now the last thing I want to touch is, if you notice throughout the application or throughout this example, console kept complaining about something called key, and basically the point behind this is that when map loops over something, React wants to keep track of each individual thing in the list. So for example, if map is mapping over 100 products and one changes, it would like to have a key on each one, so that when one changes, it will be easy to replace it with the React JSON. Otherwise, it'd be much harder for React to figure it out. So React wants you to give a unique key to each individual that you're looping over, and you have to do this by yourself by force. And that's pretty much it.